Welcome to More Than Our Story, where we strive to inspire people by profiling remarkable people. I'm joined today by John Salt, founder of MultiSport Canada. Thank you, John, for sharing your time and your story today.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm not sure that I fit the description of remarkable people, but thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, funny you should say that. I think you're remarkable because triathlon holds a very special place in my heart. It's been pivotal to my health, my mental health, in my ongoing fight against incurable brain cancer. I just want to say, John, you are part of the reason I'm still here. Your MultiSport puts on great local events that my wife and I both can easily travel to and participate in. So it's an honor and a pleasure to have you.
Well, those are very kind words of you to say. I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
So, John, what is your background in sports, professionally and personally, and what led to you founding MultiSport Canada?
Whoa. Okay. So, given that I'm 71 now, I go back a couple of years. Not quite as far back as Bob Nucky. You had him on just recently, but yeah. I mean, as a youth, I played hockey. I was sort of your typical Canadian kid, although I did immigrate from England when I was 4 years old. But played hockey. I played a little bit of hockey at St. Mike's in high school. I didn't really do too much after that in terms of staying fit. And it wasn't until my early 30s, late 20s that I started to run, trained with and start training actually rather than just running and started running marathons. Enjoyed that. I was still living in Toronto at that point in time. A lot of people trained out of the North York YMCA there and met a great bunch of people. Some were crazy. A fellow by the name of Ian Jackson, who is a ultra distance runner for many, many years. But those people were starting to dabble in triathlon and Ironman Canada, which was really the only iron distance event in North America at that point in time. And they'd been training for Ironman, and that was sort of lodged in the back of my mind. So I ran for several years, raced 6 or 7 marathons, went to Boston, which was a great experience. And then I got to a point where I might want to try something different, not too sure. Thought back to those people down in the North York Y, and by that time, Ann and I had moved to London, Ontario, and there was a fellow by the name of Mike Buck, who was a Ontario pro athlete that we knew Mike from our Toronto days, swimming at the Masters swimming group at the YMCA again. And Mike was an inspiration to me and to Ann, and had dabbled in some short distance triathlons with the Subaru Series back then, and decided that I think I'm going to do an Ironman, and so did our first Ironman in 1998, Ironman Canada. Trained for that. Mike trained us, and then from there. Did a total of 8 Ironman distance events. My best year was, in terms of time, was 2000 in Lake Placid, and then in 2005 I qualified for Kona, but I actually turned it down because Ann had qualified. She was always on the podium. She did 9 iron distance events. She was always on the podium, just about always on the podium, and she had done Kona in 2004, and that was just way too much stress for me after seeing Kona and athletes who were all hyped up. And when I qualified in 2005, and of course Ann qualified as well at Lake Placid, and she said, "Well, if you want to go, we'll go." And I said, "Yeah, no." After seeing last year, that's it for me. Then went on to do some more events. The last iron distance events I did were in Germany, Challenge, and those Challenge events in Germany, Felix Walschhofer is the race director there. I think that Roth Germany Challenge is probably the best race in the world, and went there, had an incredible experience. But in terms of starting the series. It was 2001 when I had the idea, after being at a race and seeing that things had changed a little bit. There wasn't quite the focus on the customer experience. It felt like it was becoming cookie cutter. And I knew from training myself as an athlete that, some of us get a little fanatical with it. As you yourself said, it's become a big part of your life. And I just thought, maybe we need to have another series of events that are really focused on the customer experience and focused on what the customer wants. And that's how MultiSport Canada came to fruition. And the pro I was talking about before, Mike Buck, I phoned Mike coming home from a race, and I said, Mike, we're going to start a triathlon series. He said, no, we're not starting a triathlon series. Oh, yes, we're starting a triathlon series. And the following year was our first year of the series.
So what was the landscape like for multi-sport events regionally and nationally when you first founded it? I know you mentioned the Subaru series, and obviously there was Ironman Canada, which I think was in Penticton back in those days.
That's right.
What was the Ontario scene like? I know there was Subaru, but
yeah, there was a number of smaller independent races. They tended to be run by volunteers, so very much grassroots racing. And I'm right now at a loss for Goderich was one of them on Lake Huron, which was put on by a fellow who actually had MS, and he was raising funds for local high school. And over the years, we did that race a number of times. A lot of London-based athletes did that race, and that was a real inspiring race for sure. There was probably back then about a half a dozen good, solid, independent races in Ontario, but back then it was the Subaru Series. I mean, there was that's where most of the athletes went to. There was and participated. There was 10 events there. And we put up 10 events in our first year, and within, I think it was 6 or 7 years, we surpassed their numbers. And I think I really attribute that to the fact that we were focused on the customer. I always made myself available for the customer, and I think that's important. If you have that ability, then you need to be able to engage with the customer. So yeah, that's what the landscape was like then.
actually, that's funny that you say that, because that's how we we first engaged. I forget how it came about, but it was through Facebook. I was asking about the conditions at Barrelman, and lo and behold, you were the first one to respond to me. So it's a testament to your customer first mentality.
Yeah, thank you.
So MultiSport Canada has a big presence in Ontario. I've participated in a number of them. Rose City, K-Town, Wasaga Beach, Barrelman numerous times. They're all incredibly well run. Any considerations for expanding beyond Ontario?
No, over the years, we've had all sorts of ideas in terms of what we could do to, have destination events. That's one of the reasons Barrelman came about, as a matter of fact. But no, expanding beyond Ontario, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it's interesting. For years, people would say, well, you're the largest triathlon series in Canada. But you have to put things in perspective. Triathlon is very much a niche sport. And I would still say to, Jason Burma, my business partner, yeah, we might be the largest triathlon series in Canada, but for all intents and purposes, we're still very much a mom and pop business. I mean, that's the way the series is run. It's been Jason and I Jason joined me in the second year, became my business partner, I think in the fourth or fifth year. So it's been Jason, who is truly a logistics savant, and we can go to a potential race site. And I think Jason views things in 3D, because all of a sudden everything's appearing in his head as to how this will work, keeping in mind, how is this going to be a good customer experience, race experience? So to your question, we really didn't have the scope in terms of being able to deliver outside of Ontario. We could have, but then it becomes a different animal. Now you don't have the time to focus on what we want to focus on and delivering, great races in locally in the Ontario market. And Jason, Jason's 20 years younger than I am. And during those times, he got married, he had children, he had a busy enough life as it was. And it would have been too much from a personal perspective. And again, delivery is most important. What's the customer see? What's the customer feel?
So speaking of delivery, you don't do this by yourself. You obviously have a partner and a whole team backing you. How fundamental is cohesion as a team? And can you give an example where there's been a really big obstacle to overcome where without that team effort behind you, it would have been impossible?
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, again, the team for many years, we did have a team in terms of the crew, but they're not full-time employees. Generally speaking, 98% of them are university students. Jason had relationships and connections with people, and we looked for crew there that were responsible and hardworking. We did have, prior to COVID, we did have call it a head office team, if you will, out of Barrie of 3 or 4 people. Jan Thomas was our administrator. Sharon Folks was a logistics person who worked with Jason in the background. But with COVID coming along, MultiSport Canada became Jason. I stepped back from going to the races in 2018. That was sort of my farewell tour. I got to go to every race, and as you know, I like to shake hands with our customers at the end of the race. So that was my chance to do that one last time. So Jason's communication skills when it comes to logistics is extremely important. So you asked for an example. I can go back to, we used to have a half iron distance race in Parry Sound. Man, and that was a killer half iron distance race. I don't know if you've heard of a woman by the name of Paulina Allen. She's a local pro triathlete, more so cyclist. I mean, she's an amazing cyclist, has been national and national champions and championships in cycling. She's also Steve Fleck, who's our announcer. That's Paulina and Steve are partners. And so the Parry Sound race, and the reason I mentioned Paulina is that it was actually the race where she decided she was going to turn pro. And for the life of me, you know what? I can't remember. I think it was around 2006 or 7. And the weather, we had sprint race on the Saturday, and then we had the half iron distance on the Sunday. Prior to the Saturday race, the weather came in. It was just absolutely brutal. No chance we were putting anybody in the water to start with. And the rain was so bad that we wouldn't risk putting them out on the bike course. I mean, you can do that to a certain extent if it's raining, but this was terrible, absolutely terrible. And I huddled with Jason after that. And I think this is probably the first time we had to do this, but I huddled with Jason and I said, these people have come all the way to Parry Sound to do this race. I don't know how many people are staying overnight, have hotel accommodations, but we've got to give them something. We can't just say, well, sorry, the race is canceled, because we're not in a position to refund the money. But it wasn't about refunding the money. It was these people came all the way to our event, So I decided, okay, Jay, we're gonna put the sprint in the middle of the half. What? Just a second here. But Jason and his team, you talk about cohesive team and being able to deliver. We put on that half and we started the sprint in the middle of it. And about 50% of the people who were registered for the sprint stayed on. And it was it was one of those experiences where you saw I mean, I've seen probably tens of thousands of people. I've shook their hand at the finish line, but that day was even a little more special because they didn't think they were going to be racing on Saturday, but they did on Sunday, and they enjoyed it and they had a great time.
So shifting gears here a little bit, I watched the 70.3 Worlds down in Taupo, New Zealand this past weekend.
Mhm.
Hayden Wild, hometown hero who unfortunately lost in the last few moments of the race. He was in an interview, he mentioned how he was exposed to swimming, biking, and running at a young age thanks to Triathlon New Zealand. And they have programs devoted to primary school levels. MultiSport Canada also has the Kids of Steel series. How important do you think that is in helping to build and shape the next generation of triathletes?
Oh, I think it's extremely important. And just to be clear, like the Kids of Steel events, they're not a MultiSport Canada idea. That the Kids of Steel races have been going on for years. In fact, Barry Shepley, who's a well-known coach, mentor to a lot of people, also during the Olympics, he's always the commentator for the Olympic races for the triathlon series. Barry was the one who came up with the Kids of Steel concept. And I don't know when it would have been in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. But in our in our first year, we had Kids of Steel events at, I think it was 6 of our races. Over the years, that's down now to just a couple, simply because logistically it's just too hard. And when you have kids there, you've got to be. I mean, you always have to be safe. We have to have the safest conditions possible. That's doubly so or triply so when you've got little children up there. But to answer your question, I think it's extremely important. In fact, I've started, I wouldn't call it training again, but I've gotten back in the pool. I've decided after 14 years away from doing any swim training, I'm going to start to swim again. I have been going to the local pool up in Collingwood, and I was on the pool deck, and I happened to have a Barrowman swim cap on, and oh, you're John Salt. I said, yeah. He said, you probably don't remember us, but back in Lakeside in I think it was in 2006 or 7, he said, we have a son who is on the spectrum. He's has Asperger's, and I actually have a grown son who has Asperger's, but he has Asperger's, and it's difficult for him to be in a situation where there's so many people, there's so much going on. And he came out of the water, dead last. And my wife was trying to help him put on his shoes, and the official said, "Oh, no, you can't assist any of the kids and the athletes. He's old enough." And I saw that, and I went over. I said, "No, I think we can do this. It's not a problem. This child's here to have fun, and his parents are here to have fun watching him have fun." So. Rob said to me, he said, that changed. I don't know if he said changed our life. If he did, that's probably a bit dramatic, but changed a lot of things for us and for our son. It gave him some confidence. So on one end of the spectrum, I think it's a great proving ground for young children or young adults who want to aspire to do something in the sport. There's been many of them. The Van Rasmussen children have grown up to be adults now and raced at an extremely high level. The Quick children, Derek and Angela, same thing there. So they were at the pointy end of the stick, if you will. But there's a lot of children who are one end of the spectrum to the other as it relates to ability. And I think there's a sense of camaraderie in the sport of triathlon. Mm-hmm. And I think it's great for kids to come to an event and feel that themselves while they're participating and have fun. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my answer.
Absolutely. What's your favorite part of your role?
See, my role's changed in the last 6 years, having stepped away from the series. Barrelman is really uh, still my race because it was my baby from inception. Um, but I think it's ask the question again for me, will you, Daniel?
Yeah. What do you think, or what is your favorite part of doing what you do?
Okay, yeah. So hands down, my favorite part is race day at the finish line. I've said this for years. It's one of the reasons I started it. If you want to know if one of your athlete customers had a great day, stand at the finish line. But if you're doing a good job, they should have a great day. What's more important to me is shaking the hand of an athlete and they come across and say, John, this wasn't good today, or that wasn't good today. And okay, tell me why. I mean, if you want fresh feedback to know why an experience wasn't good for that athlete, that customer, that's the best place to get it. And it's interesting too, because sometimes people are a little heated and they come across the line and the finger starts to point, and then they get a response that says, oh, okay, well, tell me about it. What can we do better? And it's really, yeah, tell me, let's go. I'm going to be shaking hands while I'm talking to you, but let's do that. So I think hands down, that's probably my favorite part of it. And there's little snapshots with that. Prior to a race, people are in transition and we're doing the pre-race briefing, and you can tell who's new. They've never done a race before. They've trained. They might have an old beater bike. They might have a $10,000 bike, but all you have to do is look at them and it's like deer in the headlights. Like, what the hell am I doing here? And that's a great feeling, only because you know that there's people here who are going to try something new for the first time. And now and again, I'll remember a face from prior to the race and I get to shake their hand at the finish line and I see that they're happy. No better feeling.
So when you set out many years ago to found a multi-sport series, would you say you've accomplished what you set out to do?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, and it wouldn't have happened without Jason, as I said before. I mean, Jason Verma, logistics savant, bar none. And it was all about introducing people to the sport and enjoying it and being able to have a lifestyle of being fit on my own. I mean, and for Jason as well, he's an incredible athlete. Jason's an incredible athlete. But I'd had 25 years in the corporate world as a retail banker, and I'd done fairly well at that. Didn't necessarily enjoy it, and that's one of the reasons that I ended up starting MultiSport Canada. I was okay. It's rewarding to an extent, but is it really rewarding? So I wanted to accomplish a couple things. I wanted to change and have something in my life that had real meaning for me. And when I started thinking about what MultiSport Canada could look like, and again, going back to the whole customer experience, what can be more rewarding, right? So yeah, it's accomplished it personally from that perspective. In terms of the events, absolutely. We know we put on quality events. We've always tried to make sure that the venues are going to be good race experiences, which sometimes, I mean, the cost on some of those races to produce in some of the locations we're at is much higher. But it's not a question of, oh, let's find some conservation area and put on a race there. Let's find something that we think is going to add to the race experience, if you will. So definitely we accomplished that for sure. Jason and I accomplished that over the years. After I left in 2018, I mean, I'm still a partner with Jason, but at that point, it had run its course for me, if you will. And Jason had to go through COVID for 2 years. The whole COVID situation for events was terrible. You couldn't do anything. I mean, there's a lot of businesses like that, but I mean, if you're talking about multi-person events, it was shut down completely. So back to the question, I think we certainly accomplished what we needed to accomplish because of the fact that we had the ability, and Jason had the ability to get the company through COVID and come back and have these events. And in fact, what's happening, he and Carolyn Simons, who's our marketing person, have done an incredible job with reaching out and introducing new groups to triathlon. And that's seen in the last couple of years. The number of people who are first timers has increased exponentially. Don't ask me to give you numbers because, but it has increased exponentially. And that's the first time in a long time. I think triathlon was sort of moving along, and it peaked in the mid 2000s and leveled off. And after COVID, it leveled off and drops a little bit. And then after COVID, it's gone back up again. And so, yeah, the ability to survive that and put on good races still after that and grow the sport again, it's a testament to, again, Jason and his team and the ability to produce those quality races. So that was another goal. So yes, we reached that goal.
So what's next for you?
Well, what's next for me? I'm living a great life. As I said, I'm 71. I stay fit on the bike and getting back in the pool again. And I've even started to run a little bit, but we live about 25 minutes south of Collingwood in the hills. I'm looking out. West is that way, east is that way. Our nearest neighbor is about 1 kilometer away. It's in the rolling hills. So every day is in fact, there's a lot of days, most days, I wouldn't say most, but there's a lot of days when Ann and I'll go, yeah, look where we live. Look at this. So what's next for me is being sort of calming down my life, not having to worry about the races and the series so much, and enjoy that with Ann. Barrowman is still very much my race inside of me. And we did announce last week and open registration. We've added an Olympic distance event to the Barrowman weekend. So the half is there, and the Olympic distance race is going to be there, still point to point. I'm really excited about that because we now have an event that's going to go from Welland to Niagara Falls to Kingsbridge, and the finish in the Olympic distance, that's a straight shot of 40K, and 25K of that's going to be on completely closed roads, which that's just doesn't happen in Ontario. And Barrowman, because of working with the Niagara Parks Commission, we've come to an agreement that we couldn't a few years ago, but we came to an agreement recently where we could use the Parkway, which is about a 20K stretch, the last 20K stretch of Barrowman. And it's pristine roads. When you're riding north, the Niagara River is over here, and on the other side, there's beautiful homes, and it's very, very quiet. And we've been able to add a looped course there. So now the athletes won't go down to the southwest through the parts of, excuse me, of the Niagara region to the southwest, where the roads every year, you never know what's going to happen with the roads. You know, there always seems to be something. But now we'll have a situation where our half distance athletes are going to be able to leave Welland and go straight to Niagara Falls, and they'll have about 65 kilometers on a looped course. So that's what's next for me in terms of an events. I'm really excited to see that happen, and that's my focus in terms of, call it business, if you will. But as I said, the focus of my life is to enjoy every little bit of it that I can.
Well, you deserve to. I want to thank you for joining, John, and sharing about your role with founding of MultiSport Canada. And I hope to be able to shake your hand at this year's Barrowman.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Daniel, and hopefully when we put this video, when you get this video out there, we're certainly going to make sure that it's on our Barrowman site. I think your story, your personal story is amazing. You know, it's, I'll go back a little bit here. If I can, I'll digress for a second. When I was 30 years old, and I was swimming at the North York Y every 4 days a week in the morning. And there was a fellow in the next lane over, 2 lanes over. His name was Fred. And Fred, I think, was at that point, he was probably late 60s, maybe early 70s. And Fred would get in the pool and for about an hour. And I remember being in the shower room after working out. And Fred just, as I say, he swam every day by himself. And it was my 30th birthday that day. And I said, Fred, man, 30 years old. I mean, I could, time's going. I mean, it's passing me by sort of thing. But 30 years old, this is, and Fred looked at me and says, John, you don't even know you're mortal yet. Wow, he was right. And now at the age I'm at now, I have a chance to reflect back on my life and back to you and reading about your story. I think it's remarkable what you're doing. I think it's great that you're trying to create awareness for people who have had some challenges and are still having some challenges, as well as exposing people to a different lifestyle of health and wellness. So kudos to you, my friend, and thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. Very nice of you to say.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Have a
Bye
great
now.
day. Bye-bye.